and welcome. And we'll start off with our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And we'll go into the screen share. And what we were doing was detailing out the actual procedures that Aaron and his sons were doing in order to be installed into the priesthood. And we had talked about Aaron's bringing his own offerings. And let's see, I'm trying to make sure. I think we're still discussing, right. This is all Aaron's own offerings that he'd brought, his sin offering and his olah. And I believe this is where we are. Verse 15. Lauren, does that sound correct?
I'm not in it yet, so.
Okay, so I'm just looking at this here. So let's start with verse 15. Vayakrev et korban ha'am. And he now presented the offering of the people. Vayikach et se'ir hachatat. And now he took the goat, the sin offering, hachatat of the sin offering, asher la'am, which belonged to the people, represented the people. Vayishchatehu vaychatehu karishon. So he slaughtered it. And this word chata, chet, it's spelled exactly the same way. Chet means, of course, a sin, but it really sort of means missing the mark. It has various interpretations. In this case, we're talking about how he sprinkled the blood like the first one, meaning, of course, like the first sin offering, his own personal sin offering. So
Did you definitely do 13 and 14?
Maybe not, and I'm happy to go
There are
back.
no Rashis on them. I don't recall that we.
Right. And I'm not sure where we stopped off. I was trying to go back to the recording to see where we stopped, but I'm very happy to. We definitely did the verse 11. We definitely did verse 11.
And we definitely did 12.
Right. I remember that too. We can do 13 and 14. That's why it's important for me to put my little arrows there. Okay. I think we could have done it, but regardless, we'll go back to 13. So this is still back to Aaron's own personal offerings. And by the way, you notice the general takeaway, this isn't rocket science here, is that before you start taking care of other people's problems, you take care of your own problems. So Aaron had to get himself in the right place before he could represent the people, right? Ve'et ha'olah, and now remember we had Aaron was bringing an olah, the olah, himtziu elav, I believe I remember this quite well now. They presented it to him, lintacher, in its pieces, right? Ve'et harosh, and the head, vayakter al hamizbeach, and he caused them to smoke on the altar. Vayirchatz et haker ve'et hakra'ayim, and he washed the innards and the legs, vayakter al ho'olah hamizbecha, and he caused them to smoke on the olah, on the altar. So here we are, where we just finished looking at this particular verse, verse 15. There's a Rashi on that, vaychatehu. He has to translate this word vaychatehu because it's hard to understand from the context. Vaychatehu, asahu kamishpat hachatat. So he translates it here as he prepared it. So I'm actually remove this translation and say that in this case, he made it according to its statutes of a chatat. Karishon, like the first, meaning like his calf. So it looks as if Rashi's understanding this as prepared it. And in fact, that is one of the...
My Rashi says exactly what you said.
Sprinkled it?
No, sacrificed it according to the law of the sin offering.
Right. So let me get rid of this. I'm going to remove this and change it.
That's interesting because it's like, verbing chatat.
I know. It's from...
Not sinning, but...
chitui is the a verbal noun of it. So there is we're going to take a look at the Torah Temimah here. Vayechatehu karishon. He prepared it, and I looked. The J is for Jastrow. It's on page 448, and the B is actually there. It's in there are two columns on each page, and so this is the second column, just to help you find it on the Jastrow dictionary. So like the first, Maharishon. Here we go. Look at this, right? Maharishon ta'un chitui. And here the word refers specifically to sprinkling, right? Just as the first required sprinkling for arba karnot, and on the four horns of ze ta'un chitui, this one too requires sprinkling. So saying sprinkling isn't altogether wrong, but prepared is probably a more accurate translation.
But as far as first one, Karishon,
Yes.
this one translates to Rashi as like his own calf.
Right. He's just because that's what we said. We said that was the Rashi.
But this is talking about the first sprinkling.
Yes, this first sprinkling of, remember, because Aaron brought a sin offering, and so he, just as his own sprinkling, his own sin offering, he had to put the blood on the four horns of the altar. Likewise, the people's offering, he had to do the same thing.
Oh, okay. So it's the same thing when it says first sprinkling or first calf.
Exactly.
Okay.
Did we see this word chitui? No, not chitui. V'yechatehu. Did we see that the first time?
I don't believe so. No, we can go back and take a quick look, but I don't believe so. I think it simply says that he placed it on the four corners, the four horns. We can go back in a second. Let me try and finish this, and then I will go back. So just to say, chitui al arba kornot, and in addition, that sprinkling had to be on the four horns. Okay, let's take a look. There's a vav somewhere here. So he discusses, right? Baruch Halevi Epstein, Rabbi Epstein discusses this word itself, de lashon vaychatehu, okay? Because the word vaychatehu, mashma, implies shehachatat gufe chite, right? Because that word seems to suggest that the actual sin offering, gufe, that the actual sin offering, he sprinkled, I suppose, in this case. Ukamo hamuvan vaychate et hamizbeach. So again, now or maybe here, chite means prepared, right? That he prepared it. And just as understood by the phrase vaychate et hamizbeach, which sometimes I think is translated as cleanse the altar, but regardless, we're saying here it would appear to mean he prepared the altar. Aval be'emet, he says, but in fact, havalei lichtov, it should have written here, here, vaychate damo, that he sprinkled his blood, its blood. Aharon, let's see, make sure. Sorry, v'lachein ketiv, and for this reason, it says karishon, like the first. Sheritzono lomar, because what he wants to tell us, shechite et dam hachatat kechatat harishon, that he sprinkled the blood of this sin offering like the first sin offering, shel Aharon, of Aaron, bechol pratav, in all its details. So again, we might want to translate it as prepared. That would make more sense here, that he prepared, prepared the blood, or he sprinkled the blood of this sin offering, just like the first one, in every detail. And the fact that it's in every detail, I'm going to infer, is why it talks about the sin offering itself and not just sprinkling the blood. All right, let's go back you wanted to see if when Aaron brings his own. Let's see. Here we go. It's right up here, right? Vayishchat et egel hachatat asher lo. He slaughtered the calf of the sin offering, which was his. Vayakrivu b'nei Aharon et adam elav vayitbol et ba'od ba'am. So the sons of Aaron presented the blood to him. He dipped his finger in the blood and he placed it on the horns of the altar. And then it says, and he then poured out the blood at the base of the altar. And then talks about the chalev, the fat, and the kidneys, etc., etc. So I'm in a way, I'm glad we went back there to take a look at the actual language there. So the Vaychatehu Karishon, I think, is to describe, and taking into account everything that we've just read about this, is that he did all the details of that. So the Torah is not going to repeat what it just said about Aaron's own offering, but that we should understand that that's in fact what happened.
So why is it so important that that they keep emphasizing his first sin offering? What's the, because like it's mentioned several times. So what's the significance of emphasizing that?
The significance of that is that Aaron was the man who prepared the golden calf. After they had heard the 10 commandments, you shall have no other gods, you shall not have any graven images, etc. And here Aaron had done that. So it was significant for several reasons. We discussed some of them, but just to review, one is to let everyone know that Aaron had been forgiven for that sin, that God had forgiven Aaron for that sin. We're going to find out that that is at least partially, was certainly it didn't mean there wasn't going to be some more atonement involved, and that atonement was going to be significant if we're able to deal with it. I'm not sure that we'll get to it, but if we don't, in the text, I will tell you what it is. So that's number one. I'm trying to think of the other things. Obviously he has to get his own act together, right? But that he was worthy of it, that he was forgiven for it, that the Jewish people themselves had been forgiven for it. And like I said, he needed to get his own house in order. And in a sense, his doing that was getting his own house in order.
I'm just fascinated by the idea that the same word, how is it that the same word, chata, might mean the thing that you did wrong, missed the mark,
right?
The reason that you have to bring the sacrifice, and also the action that you have to take in order to perform the sacrifice, namely sprinkling.
Mm-hmm.
And if sprinkling is indeed one of the ways we can understand this,
mm-hmm.
because like sprinkling is kind of missing the mark in a way. You're not aiming precisely at one spot, you're sprinkling. So
right.
It could be like missing the mark, but it's very cool to think that the one kind of missing the mark is undoing the first kind of missing the mark.
Right. So when we actually read about Aaron doing it, as I was listening to you and thinking that the wording that we just read about what Aaron did was that he placed the blood, he dipped his finger in the blood. And then I'm going to assume that he took, if you can see me, here I am taking my fingers, dipping them in the blood, and then coming to a corner, one of the horns of the altar, and going like this. So I don't know that he actually touched the horns, but that he made sure that the blood got on there. But I hear what you're saying. And so that's sort of the language it says. So it isn't so, so vague, but I hear you. And there may be some connection there with those words. I don't know, I know you have a dictionary that I don't have, and I don't know if it's all the same cognate, it's all the same root. I'd have to check the person I'd probably go to is Samson Rashville Hirsch and his dictionary and check what he has to say there. I don't have it with me right here.
Yeah, I don't actually see the word sprinkled here. What I have is Chet Tet Aleph. He gives a bunch of definitions: to miss the mark, to wrong, to sin, to make an error, to make a mistake, incur guilt, and then to make a sin offering. And then to cleanse or purify from sin.
I know. It's
And
interesting.
then in new Hebrew, and that means like post-biblical Hebrew, disinfect. Like that makes that, when they talk about disinfecting a room or something from COVID, that's the word they often use.
Interesting. So here's one, I think, important factor. And again, I was thinking, I actually have Jastro online, and I could stop this share and we could take a look at the pages of Jastro and see all the ways in which he takes the word. First of all, it's an Aramaic dictionary, and so the Aleph and the Yud are very often interchanged. You can see where I'm pointing. At any rate, it is referring specifically to an unwitting commission of a sin. In other words, it's not intentional. These offerings, by the way, it's very important to keep in mind and bear in mind that the opportunity for atonement only comes when the sin is unintentional, which means essentially that there are factors involved where there was ignorance. You either, let's take, for example, Shabbos, right? One of the prohibited labors of Shabbat, for example. There are three circumstances. One is you didn't know today was Shabbos, and so you did this, right? That you'd have to bring a sin offering for. You didn't know that working on Shabbos is forbidden, likewise, unintentional. Third example, you didn't know that this specific act was forbidden on Shabbos, unintentional. All those three circumstances would give you the opportunity to atone through a sin offering. But if you were to do it intentionally, you are not given that opportunity. And I think that is a sophisticated, or certainly not a common sort of way of looking at, paying for your crime. And people seeing that more as a punishment rather than an opportunity for cleansing and atonement. And so there's a very strong sense that that in this word, right, we really have the idea of cleansing. And bringing a chatat, the connotation of that word chatat is that through this offering, you're able to cleanse yourself. Because,
So the way I see it is sprinkling. I mean, first of all, because the root may be that unintentional sin, but then they're talking about the sin offering, and then a verb made from the sin offering. So you're right, which means to purify, but also and to atone. But the sin offering also includes sprinkling.
Right.
So that's part of that, definition of making preparing a sin offering.
Right.
I mean, that it would include sprinkling. And as far as to disinfect, I mean, that would make plenty sense too, with the same thing as, part of getting rid of the
cleansing.
Yeah.
But what I think, what this discussion is bringing out for me, and what I'm learning from this discussion, is how sophisticated or profound this word is that the Torah chose for this particular offering. And that, I always simply took it as sin offering. And then I now realize that perhaps a better translation would be a cleansing offering. And I think I may have seen it translated as an atonement offering. But a cleansing offering sort of gets down and deeper into the basic meaning of the word. But we do know that lachti or lachto does have to do with missing the mark. And that's usually the way you come to this word, and how they explain that it's referring to, they don't always tell you that it has to do with the fact that it's an unintentional sin and define unintentionality sufficiently, right?
Well,
Go ahead, sorry.
This is something that I was wondering yesterday when talking about the four corners and the blood, and it was occurring to me, well, what about the cleaning of that? And here you go, and you talk about it. Very cool, because we got to clean up these things that are actually could be life-threatening if kept uncleansed, such
And-
as,
The blood that's on the altar, you mean?
yeah, or in the four corners of, the room that we were talking about yesterday. It's part of cleaning up our sins is to make sure that it's, cleaned so that there's no residual left. And that could be, the corners of our hearts.
Right. And in the case of the altar and putting the blood there is presenting it back to God, that God is absorbing, right? Through the altar, the altar is absorbing these mistakes. I mean, I've known for a long, long time that part of the reason, that people have tremendous emotional problems sometimes is that they cannot rid themselves of a sense of guilt or the deep psychological memories they have of bad things. And this is discussing that element, right? The need to feel cleansed in a psychological kind of way. And that, yeah, go ahead.
I'm
Please.
dealing with this with a young woman that I'm mentoring right now. And this is going to give me some help in how to help herself to cleanse these things from her, because they are so consuming to her. Yeah. And
there is this typical idea about Jewish guilt, right? That Jews feel guilty all the time about everything.
Yes.
And maybe, I mean, we used to have these mechanisms for cleansing ourselves of guilt.
Right.
We don't have them anymore. It's a big loss.
So so there are a couple of things. One is Garrison Keillor, who describes guilt as the gift that keeps on giving. On a more serious level, there's a discussion of this, what Shira Beth is talking about, and the way it's done these days. The closest way we have is tzedakah, is acts of charity. That through acts of charity, if they are attached, just like in bringing an offering, it wasn't just the mechanics of bringing the offering. You had to do tshuva. I mean, you had to truly regret what you had done, but that there was this additional act that allowed you to transform that act and get rid of the, this residual guilt that keeps, that can really destroy a person. And these days, giving charity is the way one can do it.
But that was only for unintentional sins, right?
Correct. Unintentional sins, yes.
Right. Because to me, almost the concept of the unintentional sin is almost like, you pay a fine, right? You're paying a fine, you're not going to jail, right? But if you could create an intentional sin that, or something that's more intentional, you wind up with a much more severe punishment, right? So we have the mechanisms to basically, they exist today in a different way in our society, but it's the same concept, right? There's a way to, essentially relieve yourself of guilt, unless you've done something intentionally. Then you can't do that. Then there's a much more severe punishment.
Right. The processes are far more complex.
Yes.
Essentially, I don't know at this point of a sin offering that applies to an intentional sin. And I think in that particular case, the level of atonement you have to do is far deeper, far more consistent. I'm going to stop the share at this point. Let me just do this last sentence so that at least we can get to the Sh'mini portion. But there is, of course, a Rashi on this. So, Vayakrev et ha'olah, and he brought forward the olah. He brought that onto presented the olah. This is, of course, of the people. Vaya'aseha kamishpat, and he performed it according to its ordinances, according to its laws. Okay, and just very quickly, the Rashi, ha'meforash, he says kamishpat, that is the laws regarding a olah. Kamefurash be'olat nedava, he says this is as specified regarding a gift of an olah. You can make a whole offering as a gift. This is not as a statutory olah. Very often on the festivals, etc., they were statutory olot by Vayikra in the Parsha of Vayikra. And I'm going to stop the share right here. And I'm also going to stop the recording and thank those who have been with us this morning on the recording.